The 1970s flickered with promise, television daring to push into places cinema feared. But sometimes it went too far. Networks grew nervous, parents wrote letters, politicians wagged their fingers, and entire episodes were quietly erased from air. What could be so shocking that they vanished into vaults? Tonight, we unearth 15 banned TV episodes that rattled an entire generation. First, Sesame Street, Episode 847, 1976. Picture this. A storm brews over a quiet New York brownstone. The door swings open, and the Wicked Witch of the West herself steps into Sesame Street. Margaret Hamilton, cloaked in green menace, sneers at Big Bird. What was meant as playful crossover instead ignited chaos. Parents across America reported screams, nightmares, tears. Letters poured in. The Children's Television Workshop had always prided itself on trust, on comfort, on lessons wrapped in laughter. But this was too much. In an era when childhood innocence was fiercely guarded, the intrusion of a movie villain into preschool afternoons crossed a line. Broadcast only once in February 1976, episode 847 was swiftly pulled. Never rerun, never distributed. It became legend among fans, whispered about as the scary Sesame Street. Archivists buried it in the vaults for decades until fragments resurfaced online. Its absence is telling. A single half-hour of children's television had struck such raw nerves that it was treated as dangerous. The witch's cackle lingered long after the screen went dark, and in its disappearance lies proof even the gentlest shows of the 70s could stumble into darkness. 2. Hawaii 5-0. Bored, she hung herself. 1970. The camera lingers on a Hawaiian apartment. A young woman hangs from a noose, a supposed New Age therapy gone horribly wrong. Detective Steve McGarrett and his team arrive, voices tight, faces grim. It was meant as a crime drama twist. Instead, it became tragedy. Soon after airing in January 1970, reports surfaced that a viewer attempted the stunt, inspired by the show. CBS panicked. The network issued statements. Then it buried the episode entirely. Not in reruns, not in syndication, not on DVD. It was as though it had never existed. The ban cast a long shadow. Hawaii 5-0 had thrived on stylized danger, slick chases, and sharp one-liners. But here, fiction bled too close to reality. It reminded audiences and censors that television was not immune to consequence. For decades, bored, she hung herself, lived as rumor, a whispered ghost in the 5-0 canon. Bootleg tapes circulated in fan circles, always tinged with unease. Today, it stands as one of the most infamous vanished episodes of American crime drama, a sobering reminder of the line between drama and disaster. Third Star Trek, Patterns of Force, banned in Germany until 1995. A planet draped in banners, soldiers marching in lockstep, swastikas gleaming under alien suns, Captain Kirk and Spock disguised in Nazi uniforms navigate a nightmare vision of history reborn. Patterns of Force, filmed in 1968, aired in the U.S. But when German broadcasters reviewed it in the 70s, they recoiled. The wounds of the Second World War were still fresh. Nazi iconography, even fictionalized, was forbidden from entertainment. The episode was shelved for decades in West Germany. What made it dangerous was not just the symbols. It was the boldness of Star Trek's message that fascism could rise again, anywhere, even on other worlds. The episode held a mirror to audiences, and sometimes mirrors reveal too much. Fans across Europe heard whispers of the forbidden Star Trek. Bootlegs circulated like contraband. Only in 1995 did German television cautiously allow it to air, decades after its U.S. debut. Today, Patterns of Force is a relic of television's power, and the fears it awakens. Even a show built on hope, on exploration could conjure visions too raw to face. Fourth Sesame Street, banned in Mississippi, 1970. No witch, no crime, just children laughing, singing, learning together. Black children, white children, adults of every color working side by side on a cheerful city block. And yet, that image alone was enough to provoke outrage. In May 1970, the Mississippi State Commission for Educational Television voted to ban Sesame Street from airing. Their reasoning? The integrated cast wasn't representative of Mississippi. It was too progressive, too unsettling for some viewers in the Deep South still clinging to segregation. The ban lasted only a few weeks, reversed after national backlash. But its imprint remains. At the height of the civil rights era, even a children's show was caught in the storm. The decision exposed how radical Sesame Street truly was, not just teaching ABCs and numbers, but modeling equality, community, and hope. When the show finally aired in Mississippi, it was more than television. It was resistance, projected into living rooms. Proof that sometimes the simplest images, a hug, a shared laugh, can shake the world more than any political speech. 5. The Little Rascals, pulled syndication shorts, 1970s. The black and white faces of Spanky, Alfalfa, and Buckwheat had once been America's laughter. Mischief, innocence, and slapstick chaos defined the Little Rascals. But when their classic shorts resurfaced in syndication during the 1970s, a different conversation began. The laughter was interrupted by discomfort. Parents noticed the crude stereotypes embedded in Buckwheat's portrayal. Broad caricatures of black children, once overlooked in the 1930s, now stung in a post-civil rights America. By the early 70s, television stations across the country quietly pulled select episodes from circulation. What had once been dismissed as harmless fun was suddenly re-examined as racial mockery. The controversy was not merely about one child actor. It was about what television normalized. Could shows continue to broadcast smiling stereotypes to children who were growing up in a world that was demanding justice and equality? For many networks, the answer was no, and so reels of the Little Rascals vanished. Some stations replaced them with newer cartoons. Others left time slots empty. For fans, it was a jarring realization. Childhood favorites could be censored, not for violence or horror, but for the prejudice they carried. Decades later, the debate still lingers. Should these episodes be locked away or shown with context as a reminder of what once passed for entertainment? What remains clear is that their disappearance in the 1970s marked one of the earliest acknowledgments that TV could no longer escape responsibility for the images it broadcast. 6. The Three Stooges. The Yoke's on Me, pulled in 1970s. A barnyard, a gag, a pie to the face, classic Stooge mayhem. But in The Yoke's on Me, 1944, the laughs curdled. The episode shows the trio guarding a farm from Japanese-American escapees during World War II, a storyline dripping with crude wartime stereotypes. By the 1970s, as reruns kept the Stooges alive on local TV, broadcasters took notice. Civil rights groups raised objections, parents complained, and what once seemed like throwaway humor now felt like poison. The episode disappeared from most U.S. stations' rotation. The Stooges had built their legacy on slapstick, not politics. But this ban revealed an uncomfortable truth. Even physical comedy was not immune to cultural prejudice. It wasn't just about eye pokes and pratfalls. It was about the context wrapped around them. Pulling the short sparked debates over censorship. Should America erase pieces of its pop culture past or confront them? The 1970s chose erasure. And so The Yoke's on Me became infamous not for belly laughs, but for being too offensive to survive. Its banishment reminds us that comedy, like drama, can leave scars. Sometimes the joke isn't funny anymore, and sometimes the punchline reveals more about the times than the laughter ever did. 7. You Can't Do That on Television. Adoption, 1979. The sketch comedy show You Can't Do That on Television had already been poking at taboos, kids dunked in slime, jokes about politics, even digs at authority. But the 1979 episode titled Adoption crossed a line so sharp that producers slapped a Do Not Air sticker on its master tape. The premise was simple: skits surrounding adoption, but exaggerated into dark comedy. Parents feared children might misinterpret the humor as ridicule. Critics argued it trivialized the pain of kids in foster care. Within days, complaints poured in. Unlike other shows that faded slowly from syndication, this episode was killed instantly. After only 2 broadcasts in Canada, it was locked away. For decades, it became legend, spoken of by fans, never rerun, and absent even from rerun packages. What shocked audiences wasn't gore or violence. It was audacity. The idea that children's television could joke about adoption in a decade, still wrestling with social taboos about family structure, was too unsettling. By burying adoption, broadcasters sent a message. Some topics were too sacred for satire. Yet its very existence reminded viewers that censorship was not just about shielding children from monsters under the bed. It was about shielding them from society's uncomfortable truths. 8. You Can't Do That on Television. Divorce, late 1970s. Laughter in a classroom. A kid quips about parents fighting. The punchline lands, but the silence afterward is heavy. In the late 1970s, You Can't Do That on Television tried another controversial theme: divorce. It was a reality for millions of children, but on television, especially in family programming, it was taboo. Networks recoiled. Critics branded the humor tasteless. And parents, many struggling through separations themselves, complained that their children shouldn't have their pain played for laughs. The episode aired briefly in Canada before being banned outright. Even Nickelodeon, when the show migrated to the U.S. in the 1980s, refused to touch it. Fans would whisper about it, but few had ever actually seen it. What makes Divorce remarkable is its timing. In the 1970s, divorce rates were climbing, reshaping American families. But instead of opening dialogue, television erased the subject. The ban was more than censorship. It was denial. In locking the episode away, the network preserved the illusion of happy homes on screen. But in reality, children tuning in often knew the truth already. The episode's disappearance only underscored the gap between the world kids lived in and the one television insisted on showing them. 9. All in the Family. Edith's 50th birthday, 1977, censored in reruns. The kitchen is warm, familiar. Edith Bunker hums, preparing for her 50th birthday. But the laughter dies when a man enters, and what unfolds is not comedy at all. All in the Family, the show that had already broken barriers, dared to show attempted sexual assault in a primetime sitcom. When the episode first aired in 1977, it left audiences shaken. Edith, played with heartbreaking vulnerability by Gene Stapleton, is attacked by a would-be rapist. She fights, pleads, and finally escapes, but the trauma remains. The studio audience, normally raucous with laughter, sat in stunned silence. CBS initially stood by the episode, praising its realism. But when it came to reruns, many stations balked. The attempted rape storyline was too disturbing, too raw for repeated airings. Some affiliates pulled it outright, others heavily edited the attack. For years, Edith's 50th birthday was treated as the banned All in the Family. Critics, however, hailed it as one of the bravest moments in television, a sitcom confronting the terror women faced behind closed doors. Gene Stapleton's performance was lauded, though the role left her emotionally exhausted. Its censorship reveals the paradox of 70s TV. Audiences demanded realism, yet recoiled when it arrived too vividly. The episode lingers today as proof of Norman Lear's daring and a reminder that even laughter's safest spaces could hold shadows. 10th WKRP in Cincinnati. A Date with Jennifer, 1979, pulled for sensitivity. A newsroom, a gag gift, and then a prank involving a life-size CPR dummy takes a horrifying turn. In WKRP in Cincinnati's 1979 episode, A Date with Jennifer, the humor soured when Herb Tarlick fakes a heart attack. The timing? Tragic. Only weeks earlier, real-life newscaster Jessica Savage's boyfriend had died of a sudden heart attack. Viewers drew painful parallels and complaints rolled in. CBS, caught between satire and sensitivity, decided to shelve the episode in reruns. For years, A Date with Jennifer remained buried, treated as an insensitive misstep. The irony is that the episode was not malicious. It was classic WKRP, irreverent, offbeat, testing the line between bad taste and absurdity. But comedy is often judged by its timing, and in 1979, the nation wasn't ready to laugh about death on live television. For fans, the ban only deepened the show's reputation as a fearless satire of broadcasting itself. To this day, the episode remains an oddity, remembered less for its content than for the silence that followed. Proof that sometimes the culture outside the screen rewrites what's acceptable inside it. 11. Maude. Maude's Dilemma, 1972, pulled in many states. A woman sits quietly at her kitchen table, papers scattered, a phone nearby. B. Arthur's Maude, 47 years old, stares into the distance as she contemplates abortion. It was 1972, before Roe v. Wade, and television had never dared speak so openly about choice. The two-part episode shocked audiences. Supporters praised its honesty. Critics erupted in outrage. Religious groups picketed. Politicians condemned it. Letters flooded CBS, some thanking the show for tackling reality, others demanding it be pulled from air. Though it originally aired in select markets, many affiliates in the South and Midwest refused to broadcast the rerun. They called it too controversial, too divisive, unsuitable for television. In effect, Maude's Dilemma became one of the most censored episodes of the decade. For B. Arthur, it was career-defining, proving that sitcoms could carry the weight of national debate. For television history, it marked the first primetime confrontation with abortion, years before dramas would dare touch it. Its censorship underscores the fragility of progress. In the 1970s, television could start the conversation, but not without the risk of being silenced. Maude's Dilemma survives today as one of the most important and most banned episodes of its era. 12. Charlie's Angels. Angels in Chains, 1976. Censored and pulled in the South. The camera pans over a backwoods women's prison. 3 beautiful women, chained together, march in the dirt. Farrah Fawcett, Jacqueline Smith, and Kate Jackson, the angels themselves, trapped in a narrative that felt part action, part exploitation. When Angels in Chains aired in 1976, audiences were stunned. The imagery borrowed shamelessly from grindhouse cinema. Sadistic wardens, women shackled in cells, lingering shots of suffering. For many viewers, it was too much. Networks in conservative states refused to air reruns, calling it indecent. The controversy only fueled curiosity. Critics accused Charlie's Angels of glamorizing female pain, yet ratings soared. The very episode some stations banned became one of the most talked-about hours of television that year. Behind the glossy hair and pop feminism, Angels in Chains revealed something darker. The exploitation roots of 70s entertainment, where even network television flirted with sleaze. Censorship couldn't erase it. Instead, it immortalized it. Today, fans see the episode as iconic, proof that even primetime angels sometimes walk straight into hell. 13. The Waltons, The Obstacle, 1975, banned in reruns for disability themes. the gentle Virginia hills. A quiet homestead, the Waltons had always been television's safe place, wholesome stories of family, faith, and resilience. But in 1975, the episode The Obstacle rattled that serenity. It told the story of a young man returning from war, paralyzed from the waist down. The Waltons rally to help him find hope. Yet some scenes, particularly his despair, rage, and attempted self-harm, were too stark for audiences accustomed to comfort. When CBS prepared reruns, affiliates in several southern states refused to broadcast it. They cited disturbing content. Some called it inappropriate for family viewing. In truth, the discomfort stemmed not from obscenity, but from realism. Disability was rarely shown on TV in the 1970s, and when it was, networks preferred tidy inspiration over messy despair. Fans who did see the episode praised its raw honesty. Critics lauded the performance of the guest star, noting how the story illuminated the struggles of thousands of returning Vietnam veterans. Yet censorship meant its reach was cut short, and the episode lived on as one of the show's least seen chapters. The Obstacle reminds us that banning wasn't always about violence or politics. Sometimes it was about what society wasn't ready to face in its own living rooms. 14. Barney Miller. Quarantine. 1977, censored for biohazard fears. A police precinct in Manhattan. Detectives squabbling, coffee brewing, phones ringing. Then an alarming twist. A possible smallpox exposure forces the entire squad into quarantine. Laughter turns nervous. Jokes sour into fear. When Quarantine aired in 1977, it was meant as satire on bureaucracy and panic. But public reaction was uneasy. Smallpox eradication was still a global effort, and the idea of contamination struck too close to home. Several stations in the Midwest refused to rerun the episode, citing public alarm. For Barney Miller, known for threading humor through social issues, the controversy was both validation and punishment. The cast delivered biting commentary on how institutions handle crisis, but audiences in certain regions never saw it again. In hindsight, the ban feels ironic. Decades later, after real-world pandemics, Quarantine plays like prophecy. What censors once deemed too frightening now reads as sharp social commentary. Its disappearance in the 1970s reveals how fear shaped programming. Television didn't just entertain, it mirrored the anxieties of the time, and sometimes those anxieties were too raw to laugh at. 15. The Wild Wild West, The Night of the Infernal Machine. Syndication bands 1970s, flashing brass, gears, and the polished shoes of a secret agent. The Wild Wild West blended Western swagger with spy-fi spectacle, but when reruns dominated the 70s, the episode The Night of the Infernal Machine was pulled from several syndication packages. Why? Violence. A bomb plot, brutal hand-to-hand fights, and a tone that veered darker than most primetime fare. Critics in the 1970s, emboldened by anti-violence campaigns in children's programming, pressed stations to drop violent content. This episode became an early casualty. For fans, its absence was glaring. The Wild West wasn't just about shootouts. It was about gadgets, intrigue, and high-stakes danger. Cutting the episode neutered the very spirit of the show. Yet for networks, it was easier to erase than defend. Today, The Night of the Infernal Machine is remembered as part of the 70s backlash against screen violence. What vanished was not just an episode, but a piece of a genre where cowboys and spies collided. Its ban serves as a reminder: when culture shifts, even fiction can be censored into silence. Television in the 1970s was bold, fragile, and endlessly human. Episodes disappeared not just for what they showed, but for what they revealed about us. Yet even in absence, they endure. Shadows flickering at the edges of memory. Subscribe, like, and join us to rediscover more forgotten gems of screen history.